Yeah.
No, this is great. But no, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much, Frank. It looks like we're right at the noon Eastern hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Call this meeting to order. So welcome everybody to week 2 of the Ostrom Research Series, which we're kicking off today after our research roundtable of last week. And wonderful job again to all of the Ostrom Fellows and the research awardees and the visiting scholars who were able to present them. Today with a special talk by Professor Frank Laerhoven, who, as you might recall, is also our Ostrom Memorial speaker for this year, who's going to be giving a talk. Mark your calendars if it's not already. And remember that you do need to register separately for this event, along with the Governing the Commons 30 Years Later conference next Friday, right? So we'll clarify that again in announcements that are going up. But remember, you need to register separately for both of those because they're Zoom webinars, and that's just how it works. So next Thursday at noon, mark your calendars. Frank will be giving his Ostrom Memorial Lecture. Next Friday, remember, we'll put some links in the chat in just a second. We have our special Governing the Commons 30 Years Later event that we are now north of 1,000 registrations. Is that right, for David? Oh, we lost David for a second. The last I heard it was over 1,000.
Last I checked, it was, yes, over 1,000.
Yeah. So there you go.
Might be, and I haven't checked today, so it's just like every day it just keeps growing. I have no idea why.
And as we've been joking, right? They're not all Russian bots. So no, we're really excited.
Not all Russian bots.
We're really excited for this event. So we'll put those links up for you guys in just a moment. So no, we don't want to steal any thunder from next week though, because today Frank's giving a much more practical talk for us that we're very excited about on the publication game. Everything everyone expects you to know, but no one actually ever tells you, right? Frank, if you're not aware, is a workshopper of long standing, so former doctoral student of Lynn, graduate of IU, who has done a lot of path-breaking work in the realm of environmental governments and the governance of ecosystems, doing some great work for the UN, for the Food and Agriculture Organization in Senegal and Chile, as well as these days being an associate professor of geosciences. So we're really lucky to have you, Frank, both as our memorial lecture next week, but today also giving your kind of practical insights from your perch at the International Journal of the Commons and your wealth of experience in this arena. So thanks so much for joining us, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Okay, everybody, and thank you, Scott, for this nice introduction. It's too flattering, of course. Only half of it is true. The path-breaking part is definitely not true. So yeah, I'm talking to you as an editor of the International Journal of the Commons. I have published and I have sat at the other side of the publication table, and I'm beginning to learn a thing or two that I would have wanted to know when I was in the shoes of most of you. I understand that I'm dealing with lots of grad students who are at the workshop, somehow affiliated with the workshop, pursuing their PhD. I hope that there will be also a fair number of more senior staff, and I want to bounce off my ideas with them and hope that there can be a discussion. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope that that works. So I think it is.
Yep, we have your desktop right now, Frank. Yep, there you go. There's the deck.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's freezing. That's nice.
That's par for the course, right?
Yeah, I'm going to unshare it and try it again. Yeah, you have to bear with me. I'm very sorry. This is bound to happen.
That's quite all right.
We're going to unshare again.
Just in case anybody hasn't registered, I'm putting in the links right now for next week for both the Governing the Commons 30 Years Later, and we'll do the Ostrom Memorial Lecture next right here.
So while I'm still working on this, trying hard not to get nervous.
Oh no, you're okay. You're okay, Frank. This is totally fine. Believe me, this happens to me at least once a day.
No, it happens to me as well, but now I have such an esteemed audience. Normally it's just students. I'm kidding.
No.
This is actually the first slide that I wanted to kick off with. So, and I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to draw your attention to a job opening that we are having at our department. And given the fact that you are tuning into a talk like this at a place like this, I think this may interest you. And if it does, you can contact me for more information. Just when I was about to give up on Twitter, I came across this post, and I'm going to read it for you. You can read along. Just a reminder, it says that your age index does not determine your worth. I feel like this needs reiterating after being in a seminar today in which 30 plus early career researchers were treated to a slide that ranked them according to their age index. And the tweet, they got quite some traction, as you can see, tweets, retweets, and likes. And here is an excerpt of some of the reaction. It was a long thread that followed the tweet. Outrageous, cruel, horrific. The age index is just macho BS. What was the presenter thinking? Disgraceful. The age index is a stupid construct that is used by semi-numerate people. And in respecting an old age Twitter tradition, of course, the crowd went after the presenter in an attempt to cancel him or her, I think. So yuck. Which a-hole department did this was a question that I came across, and who gave that presentation was another question that I found. So yes, my name is Frank van Laerhoven, and I gave that presentation. And the a-hole department that I work at is the Sustainable Development Department of Utrecht University. And yes, I agree in retrospective that I missed the mark big time when I went ranking people according to their age index scores. But I do stand behind the message that I wanted to convey back then. And I hope to redeem myself today. I knew of the tweet, I had heard of it, but I hadn't dared to look at it. I was too embarrassed. And I had to revisit it this week when I was preparing for this talk. And when I managed to let go of my my hurt ego, because it was hurt, I realized that the discussion in the thread was actually very meaningful, interesting. It was a discussion that needed to be had. And I found myself agreeing with what was said most of the time. So committees tend to measure your worth in terms of your age index, somebody said. Also, things cannot be changed, somebody else commented. An example was shared of someone being denied a tenure because of an age index that was lower than 20. The increasing importance of these metrics for career advancement was discussed. And someone suggested that these metrics affect people's willingness to do journal peer reviews. And someone else claimed that the age index is in fact not gender neutral, which I think is true. In fact, it may even penalize other minorities in academia as well, I think. And I hope we'll get to that. Someone suggested that juniors, like some of you in this audience, should know about this. That was discussed also in the thread that followed the tweet that I was alluding to. And yes, that was and still is my point. So fixes or solutions were discussed briefly. When someone suggested that rather than using a flawed metric, one should just read the paper. Someone else responded that the fuzzy, oh, I'll read your paper and I'll know what your word can also go very wrong, which I very much agree with. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard wall. So now I'm going to ask you to interact with me. So can you go to menti.com, M-E-N-T-I, on your device, on your browser, and enter the code 1616889. Is that something that you can do if you have a device or a browser? If you're following this from your laptop, I think you can easily switch to a browser. I think that people are doing that. Yes, people are answering. That's indeed what I'm asking you to do. There is a There is a multiple choice question. I see 5 people are answering, and please go ahead. Yes, yes, fine. Can you follow what's happening on the PowerPoint, or are you now in your browser and can you not see it? I can see that, that there is a fair amount of people that have no idea what an H index is. That's good, because my talk will illuminate them. There is a couple of people that have heard about that's the biggest group so far. Although now we have a tie. No, oh, it's like a sports game. I should be a sportscaster. I see people still submitting their scores. So no, it's still a tie. Many people do not know what an H index is. That's fine. There are people who have heard about the term, but they have never checked. A couple of people, they have checked their H index this very month. So there's very few. I can tell you that I check my H index very regularly. I wouldn't say it's the first thing I do in the morning, but I am overly obsessed with my H index, and I shouldn't be. But that's what my talk will be about. So we have a nice. People are still casting votes, but I'm going to move on. So the H index was defined by Jorge Hirsch in 2005. Hirsch, hence the H. It's named after his last name. The H index, they are calculated by various indexing services such as Scopus and Web of Science, but also by Scholar Google. And this is Lynn's profile page on Scholar Google. And you can see that her H index is 161. You may ask still, what is an H index? So an H index, so a scientist, a scholar, an author has an index H if H of her total number of published papers have at least H citations each. And maybe that's still a bit difficult to wrap your head around, although it isn't very difficult. I have listed a couple of extreme examples. If you have published 500 articles and one article gets 10,000 citations and the rest of them doesn't get cited at all, your H index is 1. If you have published 2 articles and both articles get cited twice, H of 2. If you have published 2 articles and they both get cited 10,000 times, H is still 2. So if you were the lead author of 10 articles that were cited minimally 10 times, your H index is 10. If there is a scenario that is akin to the scenario above, but you were not the first author, and maybe you shouldn't have, you should only have been mentioned in the acknowledgements instead, rather than being listed as an author. H index, no difference, still 10. And what if you if you were the second, the third, or the fourth, or the last author? You had actually little to do with the publication other than being the head of the research group. H index still is 10. So this is how the H index works, how it is calculated. And in a moment I will explain you why I think this is, but for now, believe me, when I say that this metric leads to serious perverse incentives to rig the publication game. Many, and maybe most authors, maybe I'm exaggerating here, but I'm provoking you, maybe we can discuss that they will eventually succumb to the temptation to publish more rather than better papers. And they can do this, for example, by slicing thin bologna, a term that I have learned from Roger Parks. And that means that you convert, for example, an article that should have been 1 article into 10 articles. You can also begin favoring short paper production cycles with shorter data collection periods over the kinds of papers that require you to spend long times in the field. Or you may even resort to reviews of that even takes shorter to so publishing more. You can favor incremental theory development where you add an arrow or 2 to an existing framework or a box here and take out the box or a variable there. And you begin favoring that over the solving of practical problems, because the solving of practical problems in context is not something that journals are interested in publishing. Or you can get grad students like yourself to buy into the publication myth and have them accepting you as a co-author. So that these are a couple, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is a strategy to publish more papers rather than better papers. And what do you do to get cited? Because the H index is a combination of a lot of publications that get cited a lot. Well, you can team up with co-authors with highly productive and highly cited that are highly cited peers. You can favor review articles over work on based on primary data and on original ideas. And what you see is that people engage in I cite you, now please you cite me, and in cite your friends fests. And this is, I think, where the gender and the minority issue kicks in, because these groups of friends are usually old white boys networks. Or you can gravitate towards the topics that have a proven guarantee to get high numbers of citations, rather than sticking to the topic that you are really interested in and that you really want to pursue. So I didn't start with a job opening in my department just for the fun of it. I'm intertwining it with my story. So I'm returning now to that job opening of an assistant professor, tenure track, at my university in my department. So here is what you would need to bring in order to land that job and to take a fair shot at getting it. You need to be good at teaching. You have to have a strong record of publications, yes. You must have won research grants. You must be well connected, and you must be a team player. These are the usual suspects in an advertisement like this. And let's take a look at why I think these are the favorite criteria, why they are so strict, and especially strict for starters on the academic job market, such as many of you. So imagine that you get invited for an interview. So there you sit at a table, you're the job candidate, you're sitting across from the search committee, and believe it or not, you may not be aware of it, but there are a number of stakeholders, each with their own interests and motivations, that are hovering around this sphere, this arena. Let's call it an arena. That's a jargon, a concept that many of you are familiar with, right? So you're sitting at the table, many interest stakes hovering. You cannot see them, but within your department there is the head of the department, the rest of the staff, and besides the inner circle of the department, there's the university board, the researchers at other universities, there's funding agencies, journal editors. They all weigh in and determine or co-determine directly, indirectly, explicitly, implicitly, what your chances are of walking out of that room with a job offer in hand. So I'm going to take you on a journey and look at some of those actors, stakeholders, a bit more closer. So the university board, first stop. So what are their goals? What are their strategies? How do their motives and their actions create biases in the process that you are now the center of in that interview setting? So the action of the university board boils down to the motivation to optimize student numbers and to maximize research funding. The strategy to optimize student numbers is to create, I think, good programs with good teachers and good facilities, but also to offer programs that match demand of what students want. So clever boards, I think, and I have seen this happening, they will realize that demand can be created as well through smart communication and marketing efforts. And that is, in the end, cheaper and arguably more effective than hiring good educators. With regard to the strategy to maximize research funding, which I think is the second goal that motivates and that drives the action, the choices, the behavior of the board, it is wise to invest in high quality research, and that is in the hiring of what they believe will be seen as good researchers by peers, other universities, and by research funders. And they are also motivated to create research programs that match the demand, where the money goes, the demand of funders. And in doing so, they will need to assess what that demand is, what research subsidies are likely to be spent on, and they can also act more proactively, and they will want to create demand by lobbying to set research agendas of funders to reflect their own in-house expertise. And I think that the goals and the strategies put together lead to the following biases. In establishing reputable study programs, there is an emphasis on marketing and communication, not on giving your teaching credential the weight that it deserves. And in their attempt to maximize funding, they will signal to their organization to recruit researchers that are perceived as high potential in terms of future acquisition of grants and publications. And they provide the incentive to department heads to hire candidates that are likely to be seen, again, by funding agencies, by other universities, by journal editors, by other researchers, both within and outside of the department, as high potential. And under this scenario, the safest way for recruiters is to assess the risk of hiring you based on your publication and acquisition of grant money in the past. So now I'm asking you again to become active and to go to Mentimeter again, to menti.com, and answer the following question, because I want to know if what I think the world looks like coincides a little bit with you guys. Yeah, we have one answer, so please cast your vote. Don't think too long about it. This sounds about right. Yeah, so far nobody is disagreeing. So there are people with some experience and they confirm that it sounds about right. So that's good for me. So I'm not yeah, the fact that there are two answer categories that for now remain empty is boosting my my ego. So I'm not completely off. That's good. Oh, there are some answers that I cannot see. Cool. So we have people still casting their votes. I think we get an impression of what people think. So I think, yeah, nice. So we have somebody with experience who think that what I'm claiming is mostly off. That's food for discussion after. So hold on to that. I will want to hear from you. Nice. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is, yes, so the goals of funding agencies, the other stakeholder that is hovering around your table when you're sitting there as a job candidate with the search, with the search committee. So the goal of funding agencies boil down to making sure that their investment, and I'm saying that in a quote unquote kind of way, leads to solving societal problems and scientific advancements. I may hope that that's what is driving them. And a strategy to do that is to, so a strategy to determine what to invest in includes engaging with university and non-university lobbies, I guess, to hear what they have to say, what they think the right questions and the right issues are to spend tax money on for research. And their strategy to keep taxpayers happy and to optimize, quote unquote, again, their return on investment is to assess both the quality of the idea that is expressed in a grant application and the quality of the consortium of partners that submitted the proposal that is asking for money. And regarding the latter, the safest way to estimate the likelihood of success, actually delivering, is to look at past performance. So if you're gambling with tax money, it is probably risky to venture off the beaten track, and and you bet on those that have proven the ability to deliver instead. So with that in mind, the expected bias that I'm seeing coming from this is that research agendas are set by those within the academic regime. Proposals are assessed by experts in terms of the expected added value of the outcome according to the convention in the field that these experts belong to. And applicants are assessed by proxy indicators of their ability to deliver that focuses on past success. So their publication track record and their grant acquisition track records. And this bias favors increment within the academic regime, over breakthroughs coming from niches, so to say. So it favors those of you who have figured out how to play the publication game early on in their careers over those of you that have not, that are a bit slower. So again, I'm asking you to go to Mentimeter and let me know what you think of this story, my view on how a funding agency might look at the work world, what their interests are. Yeah, so people not agreeing, thinking that it's off. That's good. That's what I like to see, because this is food for discussion later on when we're done. Yeah. Okay, votes are still being cast. And while you're doing that, I'm going to move on and I'm going to look at journal editors. Journal editors, that's easy, because I am a journal editor. I know precisely what drives people like myself. And the thing that drives us, impact factors. This is, I mean, you don't know me, but this is a bit of sarcasm. I'm using sarcasm as a style figure to get my thing across. Impact factors, that's all. I'm all about impact factors. So we are looking for citable content. So more citations per publication leads to a higher impact factor for a journal. And prospecting authors looking for an outlet for their work, they are keeping a keen eye on these impact factors. So if you have a higher impact factor, that leads to an increasing willingness among cutting-edge, high-level authors to share their best work with your journal rather than with the next journal. So we let reviewers, and these are established peers, decide what merits publication and what not. That's how it works. So the expected bias then is that, so we are, and we, the journal editors, are reluctant to publish work without a proven citation potential, and our reviewers, they will favor what they are familiar with. And all in all, I think that this leads to a tendency to publish more of the same. And yet another application of the IED framework, for example, instead of, let's say, participatory action research or transdisciplinary approaches to solving problems in context. So that's the tendency, the biases that I think result from what journal editors do. And can I ask you once more to let me know what you think of this? If this, maybe you are beginning to venture into the publication game, maybe you have sent out stuff and maybe you're beginning to get some sense of how this works. Yeah. Okay. So far nobody disagreeing. Yeah. Okay, cool. That has me moving on to researchers, external researchers. So researchers at other universities, they weigh in on what's happening between you, the job candidate, and the search committee as well. I'm going to explain yet because it's not obvious maybe. So that researcher, the researcher at other university, they have an intrinsic motivation, of course, but for practical purposes of advancing her career, she knows that people are, among other things, looking at her research performance, and therefore she is motivated to publish as much as possible in high impact journal, and she will want these publications to get cited a lot, and she will want to win a lot of research grants in competition. That's what's driving the researcher in that other universities than the one that you are interviewing with. And what is the strategy that she employs to do that? Well, she will seek to team up with other researchers with whom to publish. She will select these peers based on the alignment of ideas, but also based on their expected publication potential. And that potential will be assessed by her based on the number of publications that the potential partner has already managed to pump out. She will also want to team up with other research with whom to develop research grant proposals. And in doing so, she will apply the same criteria: alignment of ideas, expected delivery, ability to deliver based on past success. And finally, she is likely to be interested to team up with institutes or universities of a good reputation, as this appears to be correlating with grant application success. The funders are looking for consortium partners of good reputation, not only individuals, but also institutes and universities. So the expected bias resulting from these incentives is that the search committee that is interviewing you, remember, they know that the candidate that they will end up hiring will be assessed by potential partners in other universities in this way. So hiring someone with a track record of many publications, many grants, and many contacts will make that department an attractive partner for other universities. Move on to the department head. Also essentially interested in student numbers and research funding. She has strategies at her disposal to achieve the first goal, and one strategy to achieve the goal of maximizing funding for research is to create programs around publishable output and fundable proposals. Another strategy at her disposal regards investing in staff that can deliver, a staff that has compatible research interests to increase in-house collaboration potential, that individually or as a team can be expected to produce citable publications and fundable grant applications, and that individually or as a team can attract partners from across university collaboration for publishing and acquisition purposes. So one bias that I expect that she will come out of this is that I expect that she will favor established themes and topics with a proven publication potential over more radical new science. And her hiring practices are affected by a bias that favors more of the same over totally new approaches to science. So new hires are favored, and new hires, mind you, you're sitting in a room being interviewed and you could be that next new hire. New hires are favored that appear to be good at publishing in high impact journals and at grant acquisitions, and all of that based on past performance, because she expects that that will have a positive effect on the department's acquisition potential and on attracting across university attention. And it will result in more invitations for publishing and proposal development. So one more last time. I think this is the last time that I'm asking you to do this. Just get out of your chairs and interact, right? So here is the last question that I'm asking you to help me with. Is this what you think about department heads? Or do you agree with my way of presenting what the goals, the strategies, and the resulting biases are that department heads are dealing with? I had hoped that there would be a department head in our midst. I have added 2 questions. That would have been nice, because then I could have get some first-hand information. I cannot. There are not too much disagreements. That's good. So the tenured staff. So what about what you hope will become your future colleagues in the department? How do they weigh in? How do they see you? Just like any of us, they will have an intrinsic motivation to contribute to science and to save the world while on it. And career advancement has them focusing on publishing, on citations, on acquisition of grant money. And this extrinsic motivation may pull them away from staying true to their inner drivers. And things can get really ugly once strategic behavior and opportunism kicks in an attempt to inflate what seemingly matters for career advancement. They'll be looking over the shoulders of the of the search committee, and they will want to tell them to pick a candidate that will increase their chance to publish, to get cited, and to win grants. they know that all of that is helped by a new hire that has the proven ability to deliver based on past success. And the bias resulting from that is a preference for hires that complement what they have already been doing in the department, that have published a lot in high impact journals, that have won many grants in competition, that have a strong network over any candidate that quote unquote scores lower on any of these preferences, on any of these criteria. So that's what you are up for. So there you are. You're sitting across the table from the search committee, and without you knowing, many often interrelated interests are hovering around you, and they are basically telling or maybe even yelling at the recruiters, please, please, please pick the one with the highest H index. And you may be lucky enough to come across a search committee that doesn't succumb to this complex of interest and that assesses your worth in a more nuanced and honest way. But the likelihood that you won't be so lucky is significantly higher, if you ask me. So now we can return to the list of qualifications that we want you to live up to if you want to take a shot at the job offer that we are having in our department. And we now kind of know where all of these criteria come from. So the board and the head of the department have an interest in your educational skills. About everyone in the game wants you to show that you are able to deliver in terms of many citable publication and granted research proposals. And your peers and your department head will be the primary actors interested in your network and team player qualities. So this is about where I'm ending my presentation, and the question, of course, is now what? And so if you're starting and you're an early career researcher hoping to get a foot in the door on the job market, well, I'm inviting you to become very much aware of what I've been just telling you and think about it. And I don't say that this is how the world works. This is my view, but take it in and discuss it with your advisors, with your colleagues, with your peers, with your friend. Bring it out in the open, get the elephant out of the room, because an elephant, I think it is. And to be honest, I don't think that things will be changing anywhere soon. So my best advice is to keep your eyes on the ball, and the ball is publishing. And if you want to win this ball game, you'll have to check the slide where I explain how you can opportunistically inflate your publication and citation numbers. But maybe you shouldn't do that, and you should stay true to yourself. But you might be shooting yourself in the foot by doing that. It's a catch-22. Is that the term in English? I don't know. This is for early career researcher. If you're tenured staff, I'm asking you to please fix this. This is what I had to say, and I really am looking forward to you telling me what you think about this. And if this is a problem, maybe you say, well, that's fine. This is how it is. This is how the world works. Or maybe you say, this is horrific. This is horrendous. This is terrible. Frank, what are you telling me? You're a cynical old man. Please get out of the room. I'm very much looking forward to that. So I'm opening the floor.
Thank you so much, Frank. First off, a round of applause, because that was just fantastic. Timely, helpful, challenging the conventional wisdom. I loved it on a lot of levels. And frankly, this is exactly what we're hoping by rejiggering the research series, right? To have us use a bit of a wider lens in thinking about the research process. And frankly, why we're doing a lot of the research process in terms of actually, getting jobs and career advancement, as you're pointing out, Frank. So really well done, very timely. It looks like Brian is going to kick us off with the first question. And just as a reminder, guys, please feel free to use the raise hand function or use the chat box as you're comfortable to interject. And I'll do my best to keep track of the queue by looking at both of those. So Brian, yeah, please feel free.
Okay. Acknowledge that there's some very real issues and problems, and hope there's good discussion about that. But on an alternative perspective, including as a practitioner who's published a bit and used to feel extremely inferior compared to, people like at Cornell or Bloomington or what have you. Some years ago, I ran across an article that talked about kind of the publication and such of people who went off to small liberal arts schools and focused on teaching. And all of a sudden, the numbers there compared to what I've done with going to conferences and doing some papers was like, okay, I'm at least respectable. So my question, which is also in the chat box, is in terms of in terms of diversity, can we at least recognize that there may be multiple strategies and what works for a practitioner? And I didn't make this up, the argument, do one paper a year, keep engaged. In teaching colleges, get your tenure and then do what you want. And if you love teaching, do that. And also, even if big universities, you can get in a little narrow niche. If you really satisfy the people who are into Tocqueville studies, maybe you don't have to care about the rest of the world. So do you have some comments about kind of alternative strategies?
No, actually, I don't. But I do agree with you. But I think, yeah, the system, the man is to blame. So in my, what are they called in English? A&D talks every year, my supervisor wants me to tell him, it's a him, what I have done, and there is a list of things that I have to present. And for 10 or 12 years now, I have been told to run the rat race and to publish 3 to 4 publications in minimally Q2, as they call them, Q2 impact factor journals. And I have to show, I mean, there's all these incentives that I have been talking about that I've been confronted with. And if I don't do that, I will not have. And for the youngsters in our midst, they won't even get a foot in the door. They won't even land a tenure job if they don't succumb to this. So I would be very much for slow science. I would be very much for an incentive that has people writing better rather than more articles. I would be very, very much for scholars, authors to be practical and to come up with recommendations and that practitioners can work with. This is in fact something that I hope to be talking about in the Ostrom lectures in a couple of days from now. But the system is working against us. So sometimes I feel uncomfortable with myself for having succumbed to these incentives. I'm doing things that I find morally rejectable. Maybe this stays between us, but I'm also slicing thin bologna and keeping my eye on the impact factor and publishing for the sake of publishing rather than for the sake of advancing science and solving problems in the. So maybe this is more, this talk is maybe more out of frustration that I'm having personally and internally, but I do think that there is an echo that other seniors can relate to, and there is a lesson that I think youngsters, early careers must be aware of these things, that it is an ugly world out there. And I didn't realize that when I was in Bloomington. I thought the world was beautiful and I could sit behind my desk and think and write and solve stuff and have fun.
It's always sunny at the workshop, Frank.
Yeah, it's always sunny at the
No, that's
Brian,
actually
no answer. Sorry, but that was my.
This is really helpful. I just want to make sure that we can hear from as many voices as possible. And in
Sure.
just a minute, I'm also wondering if you might be able to reflect on, alternative metrics, right? Maybe besides the H index that are a bit more holistic. If there's any other, even early efforts that you can point us to, but we can put a pin in that just for the time being. So I think Daphne was next. And we'll move on from there.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Frank, for a very scary, but nevertheless very informative presentation. I had a question that consists of 2 parts. From what I understand, mostly what you were talking about was kind of like tailored to young researchers, but as a PhD student and PhD candidate, I also wanted to ask if you have advice for people who are kind of even lower in this academic food chain that young researchers who are currently on the market, because some of the advice that I've heard people giving people on this stage of being an advanced PhD student, PhD candidate, I've heard that it's not always expected of us yet to publish before we are finished with our dissertation. So I was wondering whether you would probably have an alternative point of view on that. And also I've heard that some of my professors, they are saying that sometimes it's okay for us to publish in kind of smaller journals to kind of get our feet wet with the process. But again, maybe you'll have different idea on that. Thank you.
Yeah, Daphne, very good question. And many of the questions that you will have after my scary presentation, I won't be able to answer, because I really do think that there is this catch-22 or something that we cannot get out of. And I think that most of the seniors, also the department heads, the search committees, all of the people that I have mobilized, they'll be a bit embarrassed when they are confronted with this cynical picture of how the world works, and they probably don't want to be seen acting like this. And if you talk with people about these perverse incentives in the corridors and at the water cooler, is that the expression that the Americans use? In the Netherlands, it's at the coffee machine. We only drink a lot of coffee, but then people they are, yeah, ready and eagerly agreeing with the fact that something is wrong. But everybody that says, yeah, I agree that something is wrong, then but they can't get themselves to do something about it. So that's why my suggestion was to talk about it and be honest about and yeah, with your peers, your supervisors. And when I say early career researcher, I also mean PhD candidates. So I was clueless, as I think mentioned in the blurb, when I was in your shoes and at the workshop. And had I been more clever, I would have lobbied for Lynn to slap her name on my publications more often. I accidentally, without giving it much notice, managed to get one publication that has her name as a second author. Well, that paper is cited a lot. It's my highest cited paper, and it's a crappy paper. It's not a good paper, but because of her being on there. So had I been sophisticated and savvy and opportunistic, I would have tried and pushed Lynn to get her name on my papers more often. But that's, of course, not what I want the world to look like. I don't want the world to be like that. And so I'm very hesitant to tell you to act in this opportunistic way, to inflate your publication numbers and to engage in strategic behavior to get more citation. But if you do that, you will have a better chance of getting a foot in the door, landing a job at a good research university. So no answer for you either, Daphne. So with regard to publishing in lower ranking journals, I think that is a good idea. I do think, by the way, that impact factors for journal are a bit arbitrary. So I don't think that the journals with the highest impact factor are necessarily the ones that are the hardest to get into. If you have a good story, if everything is well written, you should give it a try and send it to a journal that fits the message that you want to convey. I think I'll leave it at that. There's many questions, and I'm sure we're not going to be able to answer all of them.
Indeed. But hopefully it's just the start of an important dialogue that you're helping us open, which we really appreciate. I think Jamie was next in the actual queue, and then we had some great questions from the chat that either feel free to jump in live, or I'll paraphrase Anissa after Jamie.
Thank you so much for this talk. It's been really helpful, really interesting on so many levels. My question relates to the difference between like researching in a niche field, which I can see can be dangerous. But what's the difference between that and like doing more interdisciplinary work? Because yeah. I know I come to the Ostroms kind of as it's enhancing my work in music. So I'm a musicologist. So in their world, I'm doing very innovative things. So yeah. How do you make sure that even if you're innovating, you're still connecting to that main body of academic work, of the academic regime?
Yeah. So I guess I should have been thinking about this in advance. What's the message that what's the advice that I'm giving you a scary story, and I have no way to help you getting out of the web that you're encircled with. I think you should stay true to what you want to do. I think there is a need for and an importance for interdisciplinary work. But maybe that's not the cleverest thing to do if you were to buy into the logic of the story that I just told you, because interdisciplinary work, the journals for interdisciplinary work don't have high impact factors, and that work doesn't get cited a lot. So specialist incremental work is, but you shouldn't cave, you shouldn't give in. If you want to do I happen to think that interdisciplinary work is the future for sustainable development issues. It only can be done through interdiscipline, and therefore it's such a shame that people are pulled away from interdisciplinarity for these perverse incentives that I was talking about. Because people say, well, if I stay within my niche, within my discipline, I have a chance of getting my work out in high impact journals and getting more citations, having a better shot at the job market. So people are pulled away from where they should be. If you're genuinely interested in solving the problems that we need to solve, given that it's 1 minute to 12, then you should be engaging in a combination of the natural and the social sciences. Yeah. Again, no answer. I think all the questions will be answered by me with a non-answer, I'm afraid. But stay true to what you want to do, and don't become a cynic like myself.
I hear you. And there's several really good points that are popping up in the chat box. I'm sure you guys are seeing as well. So, Anissa was asking about, and please feel free to expand on this, okay? But in addition to the point that was just made about the difficulty of kind of path-breaking interdisciplinary research that, frankly, the workshop has tried to foster for a long time. Any other comments about, diversity and inclusion in the academic job market? What more can be done, maybe throughout the hiring process, and indeed even earlier on, to help maybe foster a more inclusive environment?
Yeah.
And then there's one other one from Elizabeth about, frankly, some of the challenges, to paraphrase Elizabeth, and similarly, please feel free to jump in about, junior, scholars basically challenging, their superiors on the inequities of this system and how that can, frankly, backfire. What some alternatives to organize and kind of challenge that status quo over the medium long term might be. So perhaps you could speak to either of those if you'd like to, Frank.
Yeah, I'm not used to working with Zoom, so I'm trying to figure out where I can see those chats. So there is a pop-up that opens, is that?
Oh, that's okay.
Oh,
yeah,
you're
so at the bottom there is like a chat icon.
Yeah, I see that, but when I won't.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, we can show you later. And
so
the dialogue. But.
Yeah, equity, diversity. So of course, I mean, you must have been living under a rock or in a cave if, as a search committee, as a department head, if you haven't realized and understood that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. So what I have seen is that people around me are giving that the attention that it needs to get, without much effect, by the way, because still the glass ceiling is steadily in place in my department. I think there is a male-female disbalance and but yeah, with all the new hires, this is something that is being discussed, the importance thereof. But diversity is also reflected, and that was part of my talk in topics that are being studied, the ways in which these topics are being studied, new science over doing more of the same. And I think that the tendency tends to be less breakthrough-y. I think the safest bet that all people are buying into is to do more of the same. I think that the perverse incentives that I wanted to sketch today prevent adventurous endeavors that it's risky. There is too much at stake. So if you are, who's going to convince a search committee by telling I'm going to do something totally different? These are my ideas. You can probably not relate with them, and I have never managed to publish them. Nobody has ever given me money to pursue that path, but believe me, it's very important. That's not going to work. So not a lot of room for breakthrough, and that's maybe so it's rather incremental. And I'm saying this in an environment, the workshop, that has been an outlier in this respect. I have learned about the importance of diversity in topics and themes and breakthrough science. I have learned about this in this very place that I am talking at today. But generally speaking, I think that's the exception rather than the rule. Mm-hmm. So equity. So the equity. So what I hope that came across. So the citations, the H index suffers from inequity issue. So I cite you cite me, the old white boys networks, and everybody citing each other, and then artificially manipulating and pumping up their respective H indexes. that is something that is hard to wedge into if you're part of a minority. I think if you're yeah, so that works against it.
And I'm wondering,
Elizabeth,
Frank, maybe we could do a little bit of a lightning round before we have to kind of wind up here, because there's
yeah,
so many
yeah.
great points that are flooding in. And again, we would love to maybe even have, frankly, a follow-up session where we can dig into some more of these issues. But one topic that Veronica brought up in the chat box there was about if you have in mind, there was earlier in the chat maybe a link to Nature that has tried it a little bit to disrupt some of this, but do you have in mind any examples of groups of senior or more junior researchers who have succeeded in kind of disrupting this process at a given university? And similarly, Stacy was wondering about, what can tenured faculty do, such as tenured faculty, serving on a search committee to make sure that these, perverse incentives are recognized and that we can start to change the status quo. Just being aware of the problem, do you think that's enough, or are there more
No, it's not. It's not enough. It's a start, and I don't know where to take it from there. But keep this on the agenda. I think it's an elephant in the room. So I think I see reactions of people. I mean, I've heard that people find my talk scary and it's sad, and people are demotivated. And that was the reaction when I did this talk and some other time as well. People hate the fact that this is what the world could look like. This is my view on how the world works. But talking with peers across disciplines and departments of different generations, young and old, they tend to kind of agree with this particular view. So if we keep talking about it, if it becomes so people in this talk also seem to be surprised by what I have to say, meaning that it needs to be out. If it is an elephant in the room, then get the elephant out of the room. People are, of course, embarrassed by the fact that this is how they tend to behave and give in and succumb to the perverse incentive. And that embarrassment is something that you can work with. So if you don't like it, let's team up and do something about it. Next time we hire something, then look for other ways to assess the merits of a candidate.
No, that's great.
Yeah, and there are many wonderful young early career PhD candidates out there that are doing their thing, that are working on breakthrough ideas, and that do make it in the world. So I'm not doing justice to all the beautiful stuff that is being developed with my gloom and doom talk that I've been given, which is what pisses off people who are listening to it as well. Last time, the tweets that was sent out and the reactions that it harvested.
Oh, it's par for the course for 2020, Frank. It's okay. Yeah. I think we're used to it at this point. Hey, well, so two very last things, okay, before we have to wrap up with some concluding remarks. And that are, number one, are there any other more holistic metrics that we talked about as opposed to the H-index that you would suggest we look to? And number two, Tony brought up a great point in the chat box there about publishing with scholars from the Global South. There's a lot of impediments there in terms of even their access to journals, but is there any way to kind of promote that? Is there any discrimination that's faced if you do co-author, with folks like that, that's kind of embedded in the editorial process? So if you wanted to speak to either of those just briefly, please.
Yeah, the second question I can respond to, I'm again totally agreeing, because people in the Global South, they're totally left out of the old white boys networks, and they will never, I mean, broadly speaking, make it into the spotlights if this system continues. At the International Journal of the Commons that I'm co-editing together with Michael Schoon and Sergio Villamayor, we have an active policy in place to a preference for scholars from the Global South. We support them financially with the few means that we have, but we also allow them for additional review rounds. We help them and we explain to the reviewers what situations are. So we are a bit more patient. We are also trying to put in place specific special issues that are accommodated by and led by and guest edited by scholars from the Global South. We totally agree that that diversity in that sense needs to be yeah, all these voices, they are so meaningful and important. So if we are narrowly focusing on what we have been doing in America and in Europe for so many centuries, we are on a dead end. So that's a good question. What was the first question? In other metrics? Yeah, there are multiple other metrics. You mentioned old metrics, but the point is to get all these interests and stakeholders hovering around that protest to buy into the importance of alternative metrics, as long as they keep narrow-mindedly focusing on flawed metrics. And I think, by the way, that all metrics are flawed. But yeah, but I think we must keep searching for better ones. Not only better metrics, but having those with those interests hovering around your table where you are being interviewed, buying in and starting to use better ways to assess. And I'm not doing full justice to search committees, and I mean, they are not only looking at age indices. I mean, that's crap, of course, but so I'm exaggerating for the sake of conveying what I have to say and to share my cynical view of academia. And I do think that it is ugly sometimes, and especially for youngsters, as many of you. And I do think you should know about that.
But we can make it better.
Yes, we can.
I think you've charted some opportunities to help us do that, Frank. So one more round of applause for Frank. That was just absolutely excellent. And we at the workshop, of course, like to think we're part of that solution as well.
Yes, I think so too.
Opportunity that we'll say more about, but we're going to be hosting a new research incubator to frankly put into place and help to support interdisciplinary teams working on the kind of the radical, the longer term questions that might not get rewarded traditionally as often as they should. And we're always, of course, we want to be a sounding board for lots of other ideas to promote a more, diverse and inclusive and frankly, fun environment that doesn't run afoul of so many of these challenges that we just heard about. So Frank, let's continue this dialogue. This has been fantastic. Just a few reminders, guys. If you haven't already, please do register for Frank's Osher Memorial Lecture next Thursday. As you can tell, it's going to be a blockbuster one. It's going to be wonderful. Next Friday, of course, we have the Governing the Commons 30 Years Later conference. And then next week beyond that, we have a very full lineup, including Christy Anderson next Wednesday from Public Health, who's going to be talking to us about regulatory institutions, immigration, and genetification, which is going to be a great talk too. So thank you all for joining us. Look forward to seeing you very, very soon. And thanks again, Frank, for this provocative and really timely talk.
It was a pleasure. And thank you for having me and letting me think about and formulate my thoughts about this materializing for this talk. So thank you so much. And I hope you're not discouraged, because that was not the idea of my talk. So keep doing what you're doing. If you're at the workshop, affiliated with the workshop somehow, you're in a good place. You'll be fine.
Yeah, darn right. Well, that's right. Well, excellent. Thank you so much again, Frank. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.